guys, it's Squid. Welcome back to the channel. We are on day 5 of the Twisted Teen, Carly Gregg or Mississippi versus Carly Gregg. Um, for those of you who are new to this, well, I'm just aggressive today because I'm kind of sick of, um, I'm pretty fucking sick of people thinking they know more about this case than I do. The only person who knows more about this case than I do, besides the lawyers and the parties involved, is Flash Fan. I've been following this case since early July, Flash Fan. We've covered every pretrial hearing. We've seen the judge get mad at the defense prior. We've seen violations of the discovery deadline. And I'm sick of people going, well, this person's covering it. Well, this person's covering it. Yeah, well, it's great. They're covering it. I'm happy for them. But we've been covering it since pretty much Law and Crime decided to pick it up. But anyway, so yesterday I was a little passive aggressive this morning in somebody else's chat when they kept bringing up, when people in chat kept bringing up that other people were covering it, and it's like, yeah, whatever. But it's fine, because if they don't want to be here, fuck them. I don't care. Fuck them. Like we're carrying on yesterday's aggressive. I'm just gonna do me and fuck everybody else. We're carrying on yesterday's trend of if you don't want to be here, I don't care. We're just having a day. But today's closing arguments, each side gets 40 minutes. What it sounds like is the defense is going to split up the 40 minutes, 20 minutes each lawyer. I believe, yeah. I'm just kind of like, yeah. Anyway, there's the gun. I've Flash Fan, we'll talk. But anyway, I was a little passive aggressive, and I'm sorry for those who I was passive aggressive against, because I'm not normally passive aggressive. I'm normally just aggressive. So, and I didn't really have any caffeine yesterday, so we went to the store this morning, and we are maybe the caffeine will help me not be such a bitch. And there is my current favorite judge on the planet. Judge, y'all pissed me off, and I'm gonna let you know. Like, yeah, it's just funny when I'm right there and people are talking about it, and they're like, this person's covering it, it's this person's covering it. Well, I just told you I was. Well, this person is.
We're outside the presence of the jury.
Go fuck yourself.
Anything overnight needs to be dealt with by the state.
I'm really hoping I lose 5 or 10 subscribers today, because I don't want them fuckers anyway.
Tell me the jury's ready, we'll get started. Y'all have your equipment hooked up? Yes. Can I make it for just a second? Sure. Give me a 2 minutes.
Yeah, funny. You know I love you, Tim. And I am doing laundry and trying to keep up with this housework today. Tim, you're not included in the people I was talking about, by the way, because I love everybody that's here watching this with me, and y'all should know that by now. And if you don't know that, I'm telling you now. Like, oh, I need to get some Tinker toys. By the way, I need to get some Tinker toys and some Magnetiles, because the little loved those when we were at when we went up north. She got to play with Magnetiles for the first time and was absolutely in love. And how is everybody else doing this morning? And I think another thing that's got me a little. I just don't think that this closing arguments is going to go the way the defense wants it to. I'm taking bets on how many times Judge Arthur gets pissed today. It's yesterday was he said what most of us were probably thinking. And I'm very upset with the fact that that Bridgett tried to pull some shady shit and get these charges thrown out. When it turns out, yes, there's 40 minutes per side.
All right, I've been informed all the jurors are here.
20 minutes per, or I believe the defense is going to split it 20 and 20. Oh, Colorado Mom Girl, you are not there is a specific like few people that made a I shouldn't have said anything because it's not the people that are here. It's the people who are claim and always wanted me and kept when I first started the channel, when are you going to make content? When are you going to make content? When are you going to make content? And then they're never here. And then they talk about in a chat a case and they're like, I'm watching it over on so-and-so's channel. And it's like, but you wanted me to create content and I am creating content and you don't seem to support that content. So, but they're the reason that when I first started the channel, I was stressed out as fuck because I had a group of like 4 or 5 people asking me, kept message, and every time they saw me in a chat, when are you going to start creating content? When are you going to start creating content? And it was like, I wanted my channel to come up naturally. I didn't want to force content. So I would cover content as I found it interesting or I found it appealing, because if I'm going to make content for other people, and I love you guys, and I love the people who are here every day. I love the people who are like supporting me, but it's like the people who were pushing me to make content and then are never here to support me. It's like they stressed me out by saying, they kept going, when are you going to create content? When are you going to create content? When are you going to create content? And then they're never fucking here. They're never on replay crew. They're never in live chats. They never comment. And it's like, it was, it's like you caused me stress. And now it's like, I'm covering this trial and you don't want to, it's like, I don't want you here. That's the people like yesterday, the people who came into chat and started drama. I don't want those people. And the people who stressed me out by kept hounding me on when I was going to start content, when it was like, at that time, it was like forced content. Nothing was natural. Now, things come to me. Like, I find things I'm interested in. People tell me about things that I might be interested in. It's all, I'm guessing probably about a half an hour longer than it takes them to fill out the jury forms. I don't think it's going to take very long at all. I told you guys I was going into this case and I was biased already. But at the same time, I knew that it was going to be very hard to prove based on what I saw, my knowledge of psychology, my education background. That video was going to be very, very, very difficult to get past and providing any kind of insanity defense. That video and even though that expert Dr. Pickett yesterday for the prosecution was very long-winded, I believe he was very thorough in how he um and I'm curious, do you know why they were saying why people were saying mistrial? Because there's never any doubt that she did it. So the only thing that is up for and the
All right,
defense
anything from the state? Defense. Bring him in.
the defense isn't even claiming that she didn't do it. They're just claiming the insanity, and I don't think they proved that. So if the defense can't prove insanity, then she's guilty. There's not a lot of things that would be saying mistrial. And even though that defense witness was long, or the prosecution witness yesterday was very long-winded, he was very thorough in how he came to his decision. And yeah, she has an attitude problem like a teenager, and she didn't handle her anger appropriately. Like, I'm sorry, depression does not give you an excuse to unalive somebody. I have depression. I have anxiety. And I get aggressive from time to time, but I don't resort to wanting to unalive somebody. That's not
All
how.
right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, did everyone follow the court's instructions overnight? Did anyone allow themselves, did anyone go do any independent research or allow themselves to be permitted to view any news accounts or social media accounts? Anyone fall in that category? Everyone's shaking their head in the negative. I'm about to give you the jury instructions. I've done this more times than I can count over the last 20, 25 years of my life. Sometimes I hear these instructions in my sleep, but I couldn't sit down and write them all out for you from scratch, I don't believe. You're going to have the instructions to take back with you. So just sit there and listen. You will have the instructions to take back with you to read during your deliberations, okay? All right, members of the jury, you have heard all the testimony and received the evidence in the course of this trial. When you took your places in the courtroom, you made an oath to follow and apply the instructions of the court regarding the law. The court will now instruct you as to the rules of law, which you will use and apply to the evidence in deliberating your verdict. You are not to single out one instruction alone as stating the law, but you must consider these instructions as a whole. Neither are you to be concerned with the wisdom of any rule of law. Regardless of any opinion you may have as to what the law ought to be, it would be a violation of your sworn duty to base a verdict upon any other view of the law than that given in these instructions by the court. If in stating the law to you I repeat any rule, direction, or idea, or if I state the same in varying ways, no emphasis is intended, and you must not draw. Let's hold down the talk in the audience.
Oof.
If in stating the law to you I repeat any rule, direction, or idea, or if I state the same in varying ways, no emphasis is intended, and you must not draw any inference therefrom. The order in which these instructions are given has no significance as to their relative importance. It is your function to determine the facts in this case and to consider and weigh the evidence for that purpose. You are to apply the law to the facts and in this way decide the case. The evidence which you are to consider consists of the testimony and statements of the witnesses, any stipulations made by the attorneys, and any exhibits admitted into evidence. You are also permitted to draw such reasonable inferences from the evidence as seem justified in the light of your own experience. It is your prerogative to determine what weight and what credibility will be assigned the testimony and supporting evidence of each witness in this case. You are required and expected to use your good common sense and sound honest judgment in considering and weighing the testimony of each witness who has testified. You should not be influenced by bias, sympathy, or prejudice. Your verdict should be based on the evidence and not upon speculation, guesswork, or conjecture. The production of evidence in court is governed by rules of law. From time to time during the trial, it has been my duty as judge to rule on the admissibility of evidence. You must not concern yourselves with the reasons for the court's rulings, since they are controlled and governed by rules of law. You should not infer from any ruling by the court on these motions or objections to the evidence that the court or the judge has any opinion on the merits favoring one side or the other. You should not speculate as to possible answers to questions which the court did not require to be answered. Further, you should not draw any inference from the content of these questions. You are to disregard all evidence which was excluded by the court from consideration during the course of the trial. The law presumes every person charged with the commission of a crime to be innocent. This presumption places upon the state of Mississippi the burden of proving the defendant guilty of every material element of the crime with which she is charged. Before you can return a verdict of guilty, the state must prove that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant is not required to prove her innocence. The verdict of the jury must represent the considered judgment of each juror. In order to return a verdict, it will be necessary that each juror agree thereto. In other words, all 12 jurors must agree on any verdict in this case. It is your duty as jurors to consult with one another and to deliberate in view of reaching an agreement if you can do so without violence to your individual judgment. Each of you must decide for yourself, but do so only after an impartial consideration of the evidence with your fellow jurors. In the course of your deliberation, do not hesitate to re-examine your own views and change your opinion if convinced that it is erroneous, but do not surrender your honest convictions as to the weight or effect of evidence solely because of the opinion of your fellow jurors or for the mere purpose of returning a verdict. The court instructs the jury that the defendant has a constitutional right not to testify at trial. You should not draw any inference from the defendant's failure to testify. The defendant's failure to testify should not in any way be considered by you during the course of your deliberations. The court instructs the jury that you have heard testimony from expert witnesses. Persons who by education and experience have become an expert in some field may state their opinion on matters in that field and may also state their reasons for the opinion. Expert opinion testimony should be judged just like any other testimony. You may accept it or reject it, and you may give it as much weight as you think it deserves, considering the witness's education and experience, the reasons given for the opinion, and all other evidence in this case. You are instructed that the indictment creates no inference of guilt, and the fact that the defendant was indicted shall not be considered as evidence against him by the jury, and no inference of guilt can be drawn therefrom. You must not base your verdict solely on the number of witnesses for either party. The defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, has been charged by indictment in count 1 with the crime of first-degree murder, in count 2 with the crime of attempted murder, and in count 3 with the crime of tampering with physical evidence. Count 1. The court instructs the jury that the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, has been charged in the indictment with the crime of first-degree murder. You find from the evidence in this case beyond a reasonable doubt that on about the 19th day of March 2024 in Rankin County, Mississippi, the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, did willfully, feloniously, and without authority of law kill and murder Ashley Smylie, a human being. With deliberate design to effect the death of Ashley Smylie, then you shall find the defendant guilty as charged in count 1. If the state has failed to prove any one or more of the above listed elements beyond a reasonable doubt, then you shall find the defendant not guilty as charged in count 1 of the indictment. The court instructs the jury that the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, has been charged in the indictment with the crime of attempted murder. If you find from the evidence in this case beyond a reasonable doubt that on about the 19th day of March 2024 in Rankin County, Mississippi, the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, did willfully, unlawfully, and feloniously attempt to kill Heath Smylie, a human being, but failed to complete the act, then you shall find the defendant guilty as charged in count 2. If the state has failed to prove any one or more of the above listed elements beyond a reasonable doubt, then you shall find the defendant not guilty as charged in count 2 of the indictment. Count 3, the court instructs the jury that the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, has been charged in the indictment with the crime of tampering with physical evidence. If you find from the evidence in this case beyond a reasonable doubt that on about the 19th day of March 2024 in Rankin County, Mississippi, the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, did willfully, unlawfully, and feloniously intentionally destroy, mutilate, conceal, remove, or alter physical evidence with intent to impair its use, verity, or availability in the pending criminal investigation or prospective official proceeding, then you shall find the defendant guilty as charged in count 3. If the state has failed to prove any one or more of the above listed elements beyond a reasonable doubt, then you shall find the defendant not guilty as charged in count 3 of the indictment. The court instructs the jury that there is a presumption that an accused is sane, and therefore the burden is initially on the accused to introduce evidence which creates a reasonable doubt as to her sanity at the time of the act. However, once the defendant has created a reasonable doubt as to the defendant's sanity, it is the burden of the state to present sufficient evidence to prove the defendant's sanity beyond a reasonable doubt. The court instructs the jury that the following is the definition of insanity in Mississippi. Insanity exists when at the time of committing the act, The accused was laboring under such defect of reason from disease of mind as 1. To not know the nature and quality of the act she was doing, or 2. If she did know the nature and quality of the act, she did not know that what she was doing was wrong. The court instructs the jury that if you find that the state has proved beyond a reasonable doubt all the essential elements of count 1, first-degree murder, count 2, attempted murder, and count 3, tampering with physical evidence, then you must find the defendant guilty of count 1, first-degree murder, count 2, attempted murder, and count 3, tampering with physical evidence, unless the state of Mississippi has failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was sane at the time the defendant committed the crimes of count 1, first-degree murder, count 2, attempted murder, and count 3, tampering with physical evidence. In order to prove the defendant sane at the commission of the crimes of count 1, first-degree murder, count 2, attempted murder, and count 3, tampering with physical evidence, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that at the time of the commission of the crimes of count 1, first-degree murder, count 2, attempted murder, and count 3, tampering with physical evidence, the defendant had the mental capacity to realize and appreciate the nature and quality of her acts and to distinguish between right and wrong with reference to the act she committed. If after considering all of the evidence in this case, you find that the state has failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was sane at the time of the commission of the crimes in count 1, first-degree murder, count 2, attempted murder, and count 3, tampering with physical evidence, then your verdict must be not guilty by reason of insanity. The court instructs the jury that if you find that the defendant, when sober, is capable of distinguishing between right and wrong, and the defendant voluntarily deprives herself of the ability to distinguish between right and wrong by reason of becoming intoxicated and commits an offense while in that condition, she is criminally responsible for such acts. The court instructs the jury that when all 12 of you reach and agree upon a verdict as to the indictment, you shall return the verdict to the court in one of the following forms. Count 1. Should you find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment, then state your verdict as follows, quote, we, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment, close quotes. Should you find the defendant not guilty by reason of insanity, then state your verdict in one of the following forms. Quote, we, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, not guilty by reason of insanity, and we find that the defendant has since been restored to reason, close quote. Or, quote, we, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, not guilty by reason of insanity, and we find that she has not been restored to her reason and is a danger to the community, close quotes. Should you find the defendant not guilty of first-degree murder, then state your verdict as follows, quote, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty of first-degree murder, close quotes. Count 2. Should you find the defendant guilty of attempted murder as charged in the indictment, then state your verdict as follows, quote, we, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, guilty of attempted murder as charged in the indictment, close quotes. Should you find the defendant not guilty by reason of insanity, then state your verdict in one of the following forms, quote, we, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, not guilty by reason of insanity, and we find that the defendant has since been restored to reason, close quotes. Or, quote, we, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, not guilty by reason of insanity, and we find that she has not been restored to her reason and is a danger to the community, close quotes. Should you find the defendant not guilty of attempted murder, then state your verdict as follows, quote, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty of attempted murder. Count 3. Should you find the defendant guilty of tampering with evidence as charged in the indictment, then state your verdict as follows, quote, we, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, guilty of tampering with evidence as charged in the indictment, close quotes. Should you find the defendant not guilty by reason of insanity, then state your verdict in one of the following forms, quote, we, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, not guilty by reason of insanity, and we find that the defendant has since been restored to reason, close quotes. Or, quote, we, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, not guilty by reason of insanity, and we find that she has not been restored to her reason and is a danger to the community, close quotes. Should you find the defendant not guilty of tampering with evidence, then state your verdict as follows, quote, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty of tampering with evidence, close quotes. Write your verdicts on a clean, separate sheet of paper. It is not necessary that you sign the verdicts. Counsel for both sides will now have an opportunity to address you and make their closing or final arguments. The arguments, statements, and remarks of counsel are intended to help you understand the evidence and apply the law, but they are not evidence. The attorneys, in making these arguments to you, will be commenting upon the testimony that you have heard and the evidence that has been presented in this case. They, as you, will be recalling the evidence that has been presented. They should not intentionally try to mislead you. However, if their recollection of the evidence differs from what your recollection is, you must follow your own recollection. If any argument, statement, or remark has no basis in the evidence, then you should disregard that argument, statement, or remark. Jury instructions will be on the bench in front of the court. If either side needs them, you can come get them. If you use them, return them in the same order you picked them up in. Closing arguments on behalf of the state.
And I'm so glad that jury instructions were straight to the point. I like clear, concise. Yes, Kimmy, super clear, super clear.
May it please the court.
Pretty much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Ms. Todd stood before you
This
on
is Mike White,
Monday in her opening
one of the
statement and told you
prosecutors.
this is not a case about who did it. And in fact, all of the evidence that you've seen tells you exactly that. It's not a case about who did it. You haven't seen one shred of evidence in this case that what happened on March 19th, 2024 was caused by anyone other than Carly Madison Gregg. The defense also told you during opening statements on Monday that the state wants you to leave your common sense at the door, that they want you to tie it up in a bucket and leave it at the door. Ladies and gentlemen, all we want you to do in this case is use your common sense. And in fact, that's what Judge Arthur just instructed you to do in the very first jury instruction. And I want to talk about a few of these jury instructions with you real quick. But in jury instruction number 1, which you'll have back in the room with you, on the second page, he instructs you, you're required and expected to use your good common sense and sound, honest judgment in considering and weighing the testimony of each witness who has testified. You should not be influenced by bias, sympathy, or prejudice. Your verdict should be based on the evidence and not upon speculation, guesswork, or conjecture. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the state, all we want you to do is to go back there and use your good common sense and your sound, honest judgment. And again, I don't believe that you've heard one shred of evidence throughout this entire week that the person who shot Ashley Smylie was in fact Carly Madison Gregg. The person who shot and attempted to kill Heath Smylie was Carly Madison Gregg. And the person who took down the camera from the kitchen and hid it in the refrigerator behind some water bottles was Carly Madison Gregg. Now, Judge Arthur also read you the elements of the crimes. And again, you'll have this information back there with you in the jury instructions. It's jury instruction number 8. And I kind of want to go down because as a simple person myself, I like to kind of have a roadmap as to where I'm going. So I like to be able to look at things and see them on paper. And that's exactly what these jury instructions provide you, kind of a roadmap to help guide you in your deliberations. So I want to talk about count 1, which is the first degree murder. And there's 3 elements here that it has listed. And the very first one says that on about the 19th day of March, 2024 in Rankin County, Mississippi. That's the first thing you have to find. Ladies and gentlemen, all the testimony has been that this happened on March 19th, 2024. You heard from Deputy Hunter Lewis, who was the first deputy who arrived on the scene there, that he was called out that day, that he received a call from dispatch to respond to 214 Ashton Way, which is in the Farmington Station subdivision off of Old Fannin Road. And you heard Mr. Kevin Collins, the 911 dispatcher, who told you that the call out came on that day at that time about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And you heard them tell you that obviously Farmington Station is located in Rankin County, Mississippi.
I believe that's her
no
family,
question
her grandparents.
as to that first part of the element there. As to number 2, that the defendant Carly Madison Gregg did willfully, feloniously, and without authority of law kill and murder Ashley Smylie, a human being. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard from Mr. Cliff Dunlap, the deputy coroner, who told you that the manner and cause of death in this case was found to be 3 gunshot wounds to the head, and that it was found to be homicide, and that the victim was indeed identified as Miss Ashley Smylie. The last part there is that she did it with deliberate design to affect the death of Ashley Smylie, the victim. Ladies and gentlemen, I would submit to you that in the state of Mississippi, when it talks about deliberate design, that it's simply talking about an intent to kill, the victim, Ashley Smylie, that she did this with an intent to kill. And I would further submit to you that the use of a deadly weapon is an intent to kill. Whenever you aim a deadly weapon, a pistol, a 357 revolver, at someone's head and you shoot 3 times, that's certainly an intent to kill. Now, again, it's not a case about who did it. And I'll show you some of the video here in just a second. But let's think about what happened that day. So you remember from the video, you saw from the garage, you heard several witnesses talk about it, that earlier that day, Mr. Bennett Germany and another friend, Sarah Catherine Rayleigh, who the defense put on the stand yesterday, you heard from them, and they said they devised this plan.
Pause. Time out. Did you see Bridget's side eye and smirk when he used the teenagers' full names? Yesterday she threw pretty much a lawyer hissy fit about why about the children's names being used. It's like no one knows their faces, no one knows their voices. Like they are like Colorado Mountain Girl, I don't happen to know. I don't know anybody in that area. Otherwise, I would have asked someone to go into the courtroom and look. Um, I believe it's generally 6 and 6. I don't think they have any alternates in this case because in jury instructions they said all 12 of you have to come to a decision. I'm like, oh great. Oh yeah, I took a picture of it. I will like bring it up at a break, but like if it's not bad, it's just like, you know, scab picked, but like yeah, I the side eye from Bridgett Todd, the defense attorney, um was like her attitude is palpable. Palpable.
Plan to go talk to Ashley, to go talk to Carly's mom, because they were worried about Carly. They were good friends. They were worried about Carly, and they were worried about her drug use, her use of burner phones. And I just want to be clear, ladies, this is not a case about marijuana and whether or not she was smoking marijuana. This is a case about whether or not she was intoxicated, voluntary intoxicated. You heard me talk to Dr. Clark about that she would, one of these times that she says she has one of these events where she supposedly zoned out. That in fact, what happened was that she went and smoked marijuana. It could have been any drug, but it was just marijuana. And she zoned out and she had this event where supposedly she says that she, fell out on the floor and whatever happened. And she did that after her mom and Heath left one day and went to the grocery store. But I just want to be clear, it's not a case about marijuana. It's simply a case about, her actions. And so Bennett and Sarah Catherine, they devised this plan. They're going to tell Miss Smylie. Well, obviously, you heard testimony that one of the things that Miss Smylie was worried about was her daughter, Carly, the love of her life. You heard that she had another daughter who died at a very young age from some type of genetic disorder that she had. So you got Carly here. She's the love of Ashley's life. Obviously, she's disappointed, probably a little bit sad, probably worried for her daughter. And the last thing that she wants her to do, according to the defense, is turn into her dad, right? Her biological dad, who you've heard about, who obviously liked to use a lot of drugs, abuse a lot of drugs. So at some point, she confronts Carly. She searches her backpack, whether in the car, on the ride home, or at the school. And then you see them get home, and you heard Dr. Pickett talk about it yesterday, that the situation seemed a little bit tense, right? That they get out of the car in their garage. You don't hear, they're not talking to each other. And they go in, you see Ashley put her coat and her phone down on the bar there in the kitchen, and she proceeds directly to the side of the house where Carly's room is located, presumably to start searching through Carly's room, right? And so you see Carly kind of walk back and forth. You see her walk there to the living room area and kind of listen to see what her mom's doing. At some point, she eventually takes the dogs out, right? I don't know what happened while she was outside, ladies and gentlemen, but at some point, whenever she was outside, she made up her mind, if not long before. We'll talk about that in a second, her conversations with her friend from MSMS, Thad, that you heard from. But at some point outside, she makes up her mind exactly what she's going to do. And she comes back in from taking out the dogs. She walks there to that living room area, kind of listens to see if her mom's still in her room. And then, without hesitation, she walks, as Dr. Pickett said, to the side of the house, her mom and Heath's bedroom, where this pistol is located. She knows it's located there. Now, they want you to believe that from the time she brought the dogs back in or took the dogs out, that she blacked out at that point. You heard me ask Dr. Clark. Well, from the time she took out the dogs to the time she was arrested by Deputy Shack, who you also heard from, that she was blacked out in that period. Well, that's a real convenient time to be blacked out, right? And so she brings the dogs back in, and she goes directly to her mom's room and Heath's room, and she retrieves this pistol. And you see her walk back across the screen. Well, when she gets there, she looks around the corner into the kitchen to make sure that her mom hasn't come out of her room, knowing exactly what she's doing. Cool, calm, calculated, and callous. She walks directly, she proceeds to her room, and a couple seconds later, you hear the shots. Boom, boom. You hear two shots within 3 seconds of each other. You've seen the pictures. You heard Dr. Pickett testify yesterday. Two well-placed shots right to the side of Miss Smiley's head, a relatively small target. And then a couple seconds later, boom, you hear a third shot right under the chin. And we believe it's right under the chin is the third shot. We know it's right under the chin. We believe it's the third shot. You heard Deputy Investigator Burnell talk about the stippling, the powder burn around the shot, right? And he tells you that based off his training and experience, that shot had to be within 36 inches, because that's when you see stippling, the powder that comes out that's still ignited, that doesn't have time to burn, and it burns right here on Miss Smiley's face. And then what does she do? Immediately, you'll see on the video that happens at 4:14 p.m. Immediately, she comes back in. She gets on her mom's phone. She has the wherewithal to enter her mom's code onto her phone and to text someone specific. And that someone specific was her stepdad, Heath Smylie. And you'll see that text message was sent within the same minute, 4:14, that she shot and killed her mom. And what did she say to him? Something to the effect of, "When are you going to be home, honey?" And it's perfect grammar. The comma's in the right place right before honey, right? She knows exactly what she's doing. She comes in there. She knows exactly where the camera is. She comes. She's got the gun hidden behind her. She slides down into the chair, and you hear her put it down on the bar stool. You can hear it whenever you get back to the jury room. You'll be able to hear that. She puts it down. And you hear Dr. Pickett talk about, she's got the wherewithal to know exactly where the dogs are. The dog walks behind her. You'll see it. He walks behind her, and she knows let me make sure he doesn't knock the gun off. Right? At some point, she begins text messaging her friend. She shoots her mom at 4:14. Then she invites her friend from school, who you heard from, Brooke. She invites Brooke over. You'll see the messages between her and Brooke. They're in evidence. And you'll see where Brooke texts her at 4:58, basically 40 minutes later, 45 minutes later, and says, "I'm here." Brooke had no clue what she was about to walk into. Carly meets her at the door, says something to the effect of, have you ever seen or are you squeamish of dead bodies? Well, Brooke says, I don't know. I've never seen a dead body. Not thinking that there's a dead body currently in the house, right? Carly's walking around with the gun. Carly leads her back to the room and shows her dead mom, who's got her arms crossed over, who's been posed, right? She's posed her mom at this point. She's put her arms across her. She's put a red towel over her face. Again, cool, calm, and calculated. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew exactly who to reach out to during this time. She's reaching out to all of her friends. You heard from multiple friends that she reached out to. You heard from her friend Thad, who she was texting, and actually before they text, she calls him on FaceTime. And what does she tell him? Well, she tells him, and excuse my language, I fucked up, right? Well, how do you know you messed up if you don't know what you did? She knew what she did. She knew the difference between right and wrong. So she obviously tells Thad, but she can't tell him what she did. She knows she can't tell him over the phone. Well, then, being a good friend and being worried, Thad begins to text her after they get off the phone. And they're messaging. Well, of course, in the meantime, she's walking back and forth in and out of her room where her mom's located. She's walking back and forth. She's sending messages to multiple other friends. And Thad is messaging her, but he can't get a response. And he says, I'm worried about you. If I don't hear from you, I'm going to call 911. And she says, you can't do that. Why? Why can't you call 911? Because she knows what she did was wrong. And she doesn't want 911 over there because she's about to try to kill Heath. And she doesn't want 911 over there because it's going to ruin her plan. Right? Knowing the difference between right and wrong. And you heard me, I very specifically asked Dr. Clark, you render the opinion that she could not appreciate the difference between right and wrong. Right? Well, you heard Dr. Pickett and Dr. Gugliano testify yesterday. That's not the standard in Mississippi. In fact, there's an instruction in here that defines, it's jury instruction number 10, that defines exactly what insanity is. And it goes on down there, and it says that the accused was laboring under such defective reasoning from disease of mind as to not know the nature and quality of the act she was doing, or two, if she did know the nature and quality of the act she was doing, she did not know what she was doing was wrong. It's not appreciate. The standard in Mississippi is not that you appreciate the difference between right and wrong. She knew what she was doing was wrong. Look at all of her actions. Sneaking around the house, calling over the friends, knowing not to tell the friends over the phone what she did. SK that they called in yesterday, her friend. What does she say? Dr. Pickett talked about it. Well, she says, I'll tell you tomorrow if I see you. Well, why would I not see you tomorrow? Well, because I'm going to be in jail probably. Right? She knew what she did was wrong.
I love this judge.
She tells her friend, Brooke, whenever Brooke comes over, she says, I put 3 in my mom, and I've got 3 more in here for Heath whenever he gets home. Right? I'm going to take care of him. 3 more what? 3 more bullets in the gun. She texted her friend, Bennett, tried to call him, did call him, text him, and he tells her, of course, again, he's a good friend too. He's worried about her. Same one that told her mom what had been going on, that he was worried about her. Trying to do the right thing. He tells her, don't hurt yourself or anyone else. Don't harm yourself or anyone else. What does she say? Too late. Again, knowing the difference between right and wrong. You saw the video from Deputy Shack, and they want you to believe that he did something wrong because he muted his body cam or whatever he did. He told you that whenever he got Carly out of the back of his car and the other deputy started performing the GSR test, on Carly's hands, which you saw them doing there, being as nice as all get out to her, right? Baby, are you okay? You heard him say that his involvement in the case was over. He never went in the house. He didn't transport her to jail or anywhere else. They want you to believe that him muting the body cam was him doing something wrong. He told you that his involvement was done and over at that time. Now, I want to play just a short clip of the video for you before my time's up.
Whoop, here we go. Oh, I filled out my application for monetization this morning, so.
Thank you.
Those poor dogs. I mean, poor Ashley, but.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's no doubt that Carly Madison Gregg is the one who killed her mom, Ashley Smylie. There's no doubt that she attempted to kill Heath Smylie when she aimed the gun right at his head and shot and hit him in the shoulder. And there's no doubt that she's the one who hid the camera, thus tampering with evidence in the refrigerator. And we would ask you that you go back there and you find her guilty of all three, because she was not insane at the time that this happened. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew the difference between right and wrong.
I mean, what do you say after that? That was kind of a legal mic drop moment. Showing the video was powerful.
Good morning. I know it's been a long week for all of you guys, and I know you're tired of coming here every day, but I want to take a minute and talk about why the state has the burden of proof that they have, the highest burden of proof that our law allows, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. A lot of people think that having that high of a burden is there because it's supposed to protect the defendants in criminal cases. But in fact, I think it protects the jurors just the same, if not more, than it does the defendant, because making the state prove every element of their case beyond a reasonable doubt is what is going to keep each of you from waking up in the middle of the night. The decisions that you make today will not just affect Carly Gregg, it will affect her entire family. And it's a heavy burden to carry. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about the truth. The truth is rarely pure and never simple. That's what Oscar Wilde said. Let's talk about what is undisputed in this case. It is undisputed that Carly loved her mom. You never heard the testimony of one person in this case who said otherwise. It's undisputed that Carly had no history of violence prior to March 19th. Nothing.
Okay, gotta hop on my soapbox for a minute. Since when do you need a history of violence to be violent? You don't. So F that, Bridgett. You can love someone and get mad at them. And because of her attitude problems and her anger problems, she took what should be just an argument and a take your punishment and move the hell on with life. She decided to make a permanent decision with her anger. That is not anybody else's fault. And if she was so worried about her affecting her family, she wouldn't have fucking killed her mom in the first place. All right, I'm going to hop off my soapbox now.
You heard. There is no evidence.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
It's undisputed that Carly Gregg loved her stepdad. In fact, he was the only dad she really ever had. No one told you otherwise. It's undisputed that Carly Gregg believed her father had a mental illness, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. Carly was afraid of her dad. She knew he was an unsuccessful man. She knew he was abusive. She didn't like being around him. She didn't want to be like him. It's also undisputed that that's something Carly worried about all the time, because that's something her mom worried about all the time. Her mom frequently worried that Carly was going to end up with the same mental illnesses that her dad had, because they're hereditary. It is undisputed that Carly had been experiencing serious mental health issues for quite some time prior to the events of March 19th. She had bulimia for 2 years. She had intrusive thoughts. She had racing thoughts.
I had bulimia in high school. It doesn't mean I killed anybody.
Self-harm behaviors. Carly had anxiety. She had been diagnosed with a major depressive disorder, and she had developed trouble sleeping for months prior to March 19th. Moreover, we have her journal entry from April 7th of 2023 in which she writes down, "Do I have schizophrenia?" We have Carly's other journal entries prior to March 19th, including her journal entry on March 12th, which you'll have back there in there with you, and I implore you to read, in which Carly writes down and says, "Am I having a psychotic break?" Talking about the voices in her head. We heard the testimony of SK, and that testimony came out on cross-examination, not with me on direct, but with the prosecutor on cross, that yes, Carly did in fact tell somebody prior to March 19th that she'd been hearing voices in her head. And who did she tell? The person she was most likely to tell, her very best friend, who told us that they told each other everything. Now, it is also undisputed that Carly's mental health issues worsened by December of 2023 to the point that her parents sought medical intervention and put her in counseling and got her on an antidepressant And I want to take a minute and break that decision down because we've spent a lot of time in this case talking about Carly and her mom and how much they loved each other. But I want to break down the decision a mom is making to put her child on an antidepressant at that point. What did we know about Ashley Smylie? That she was an incredibly loving mother. Her world revolved around Carly. What Michael just told you was true. Carly was the love of her mother's life. We also know that Carly's mom was overprotective, and understandably so because she had lost a child. Carly was the only child she had left. Do you honestly believe that loving, overprotective mother would make a decision to put her child on an antidepressant medication when she herself had had horrible side effects when placed on Prozac? She had become suicidal. Do you think that mother would have taken any risk with her child, the only child she had left, knowing how serious those risks were, when she decided to put her 14-year-old on an antidepressant medication? No, of course she wouldn't. That tells you everything you need to know about the serious issues Carly was having, whether her parents wanted to admit it, whether Carly wanted to admit it or not. You can't tell me Ashley Smylie, as loving and protective as she was, would have taken that risk with Carly if it wasn't required. Now, knowing all this, it's also undisputed by Rebecca Kirk, the only medical professional who spent more than a day with Carly that you heard from in this case, who had treated Carly from January of 2024 to March of 2024, a 3-month period of time, that Carly was a sweet, gifted child with no history of violence. Ms. Kirk also called the taking the knife to school incident much ado about nothing. She told us that it was evident that Carly loved her mom, wanted to please her mom, and was worried about stressing her mom out to the point that Carly walked on eggshells, trying not to upset her mom. She told us a story about how at one point Carly saw her mom having to grade a bunch of tests, being stressed out, and Carly wanted to help. So she asked her mom if she could help her grade the test. And when Ashley snapped back, which is something parents sometimes do when they're stressed out and a child catches you at the wrong moment, that hurt Carly's feelings so much, that was the only thing that Rebecca Kirk could pull out of her when she was trying to get Carly to open up about traumatic experiences she had had. Just having a mom snap at you was traumatic to Carly. How could Carly tell her mom she was experiencing the same mental health issues that her dad had? How could any 14-year-old? It's also undisputed from Miss Kirk herself that she knew there was more going on with Carly than Carly was disclosing. And she worked very hard at that last session trying to pull it out of Carly, to the point that she thought, maybe I should refer them to somebody else because there's more here than I can get to. We've heard the testimony of Carly's stepfather, who has no reason to defend this child. It's not his biological child. He was very much in love with his wife. They were still in the honeymoon phase. You heard him on that 911 call. That was a man in shock, in grief, and in pain.
He sounded like a chick on that 911 call.
You heard his testimony about feeling intimidated regarding his testimony in this case.
He felt intimidated because he's a beta.
But despite all of that, he has continued to tell the truth consistently from March 19th until his testimony in this courtroom today, and he continues to stand by Carly to this day and support her. And he said, yeah, I've noticed that Carly was experiencing memory lapses in the fall of 2023. It was bizarre. I noticed that Carly was losing track of time. It was bizarre.
I lose track of
They knew
time and I'm
Carly wasn't able
39.
to
Does that
sleep.
count?
They were worried about how much melatonin she was taking to try to sleep at night. We heard from Dr. Pickett how that all correlates with bipolar disorder. It is undisputed from the testimony of the minors who testified in this courtroom today, this week, that Carly had only started smoking marijuana in February. It is also undisputed by the testimony in this case and the records we put in evidence from Vital Corps, which you'll have back there with you, and I hope you'll look at, that it was only after Carly was finally put on Abilify, an antipsychotic medication, that the voices stopped and her mental health issues decreased. The crying spells, the depression, the low lows. Only after the antipsychotic medication. And why? Well, we heard from the medical professionals why. In the words of Dr. Clark, when you have a child experiencing psychotic issues, you have to stabilize their mood before an antidepressant can be effective. And if you don't stabilize their mood, then the antidepressant can do more harm than good. And that's exactly what happened to Carly Gregg on March 19th. We heard the video from the garage cam of Heath Smylie coming home on March 19th. We heard those feral screams that Carly made the whole time. And we heard the testimony of Mr. Smylie that he was so convinced by the state of terror Carly was in that after she left that house and he was wounded and bleeding, he walked around the house with the handgun looking for the intruder that he believed was there based on the state of terror Carly was in. We heard the screams. You can't fake that. You can't make that terror up. Carly has consistently reported to everyone that the last thing she remembered on March 19th was taking the dogs out, and the next thing she remembered was crawling through a sewer filled with water. And I personally believe that it was the cold water that brought Carly back out of it and back to herself, the shock of it. The state would have you believe that Carly intended to kill her mom on March 19th when Carly didn't even know during the evaluations that her friends had sought to intervene because they believed that what they saw from Carly was due to marijuana use that started in February rather than symptoms of a mental illness that they could not know about.
Does she truly believe this BS?
That story just doesn't track. Because for the genius kid that Carly has been repeatedly described as, don't you think she would have known if she intended to do what she did on March 19th, where the camera was in the kitchen, and that she ought to take it down before it films her doing everything she did? Because I didn't make a 30 on my ACT, but I would have known to do that. That doesn't sound like the actions of a smart kid who was intending to do anything. If Carly intended to kill her mom because her mom found out she was smoking pot, then why wouldn't she have left the house after she killed her mom? Why not run then? Why call all of her good friends asking for help, terrified, crying, saying she couldn't tell them what happened? Why text her stepdad anything? Why wait in the house? And what did her stepdad have to do with anything? He didn't know about the marijuana usage. He didn't have any skin in that game. It doesn't make sense. And the state can't tell you why she did any of those things. But they have to prove it to you.
Because she's a teenager who just got yelled at by her mom.
Now,
Are teenagers rational?
not
Fuck
her
no.
stepdad, not her counselors, not Dr. Clark, who was teaching psychiatry at Harvard while Dr. Pickett was still in medical school, believed that Carly was a sociopath or a psychopath. Even Dr. Pickett said that was going too far. The state put on the testimony of VW, who is the only person who told us anything about Carly making a statement about shooting her mom, and she had 3 more for her stepdad. I didn't hear that statement from the law enforcement officers that interviewed her. I heard it from the prosecutor. But also
You heard it from her friend,
that BW
FYI.
was a bit of an unreliable witness because she answered the first question of where did Carly get marijuana from? I don't know. To have to answer immediately with the follow-up question, well, isn't it true that you bought it and gave it to her? Yeah, that's true. So that tells us right there we've got a little bit of an unreliable witness. Now, we also had Dr. Pickett, who gave us his opinion. But Dr. Pickett admitted that he had no experience whatsoever in the field of child and adolescent psychiatry. He had never evaluated a child before Carly. He had never testified in a criminal case before, and he had never qualified as an expert before in anything, in any criminal case before this one. So I have a hard time accepting Dr. Pickett's opinion that, especially when he is discounting the diagnosis of a doctor who diagnosed Carly's father with bipolar disorder, and the reason that Dr. Pickett told us that he discounted this other doctor's diagnosis was because that doctor had only seen Kevin Gregg 3 times. Well, Dr. Pickett saw him 0 times, but yet he's able to undiagnose him and re-diagnose him. I mean, if Dr. Pickett can diagnose or undiagnose someone without ever seeing them, he's going to have a hell of a career.
Okay, I have to stop because this bitch is pissing me off. One, you can't undiagnose or diagnose anything based on years old medical records, and her father has never been interviewed, brought up in this case. Her dad has not shown his face in this courtroom. You can't. So taking her dad's medical records of what is and is not true is complete BS, in my opinion. 2, trying to attack an expert witness's age. Our witness was teaching at Harvard before their witness was even in medical school. Not good in the jury. Not good. So that's the last thing they're going to bring up is attacking the credentials. That is not something I would want to leave in a jury's mind. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a layperson. But if I was a jury member, that would royally piss me off. From a medical perspective, an antipsychotic is used first and foremost to treat behaviors. Ask me how I know. I've been on 2 antipsychotics and I have no psychotic diagnosis. I have anxiety and depression. I have generalized anxiety disorder and I have major depressive disorder. I have been used. Also, an antipsychotic helped me with my headaches before my brain surgery. So, like, just because you're put on an antipsychotic does not mean you have a psychotic diagnosis. So making that link is one step too far for me. So if anybody on the jury has any sort of medical background, they're going to see right through this bullshit. Like, oh, I just can't. And there's been no history of her having thoughts like that before she decided to unalive her mom. And then all of a sudden she tells every expert that she talks to that she had intrusive thoughts. We all have an intrusive thought. It's called an inner monologue, a conscience, and an internal dialogue that we all have. And as a teenager, do you know what your internal dialogue says? Do you know that you have an internal dialogue? No, because you're a teenager. And as Ung Hung Hero said, she has a permanent problem or permanent solution to a temporary problem. She had an attitude problem. She was angry. Her stepdad lied and said that she would never. And her stepdad's relationship with her is just weird. Yeah, not everybody has an internal dialogue. You know who doesn't have an internal dialogue? A psychopath. And yes, and her father didn't kill her mom. She did. And I'm sorry, anybody who I've known who's been in a psychotic break, I have worked with patients who have been in a psychotic break. My professor told me you can take the phys rehab out of mental health, but you can never take the mental health out of phys rehab. The first schizophrenic patient I worked with was loud, boisterous, didn't know where they were, weren't alert and oriented, thought they had delusions of grandiosity. That video, to me, in my medical opinion, from working with patients and having a psych background, does not say psychotic break. It says calculated, cunning. It says I know. And I've worked with patients who have had things, and when I do a cognitive screening on a mental health patient, their handwriting, their grammar, just does not, like, she would not have been able to get out a text message with perfect grammar. I'm telling you, I've worked with patients who I've had just write simple sentences before. They cannot write their own names, let alone type out a text message and unlock a phone. She had to unlock a phone. Remember, she had to unlock a phone. If you're in a psychotic break, do you remember what the code is to your mother's phone? Girl, my guess would be no. Anyway, let's get back off my soapbox yet again. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
And even though Dr. Pickett denied having a preconceived bias going into this case, I couldn't help but realize he had memorized all the medication that Kevin Gregg was on that he believed contributed to Kevin Gregg just being a drug addict. But he somehow missed the 3 antipsychotic medications that Kevin Gregg had been on. That Mr. Gregg had been prescribed for his bipolar disorder and possibly schizophrenia. You know what? Those facts didn't fit his story, so no need to include them. And I actually couldn't stop thinking about that. Why was it that he memorized the medications he believed were easy for people to abuse and become addicted to, but just couldn't remember at all the 3 antipsychotic medications that Mr. Gregg was on at the same time? That stood out to me, who's not a doctor and who doesn't have training in these fields. I had to go Google those drugs to learn they were antipsychotics. And then I realized when I was looking at Dr. Pickett's CV, which we also put into evidence, and I'll hope you look at, that he served as a Hinds County Sheriff's deputy for 3 years prior to going to medical school. And it made sense. Dennis diagnosis made sense to me. Because when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I hope that seeing all the people who knew and loved Carly the best prior to March 19th, her friends, her maternal grandparents, her stepfather, her counselor, I hope seeing that they still love and support Carly Gregg after March 19th tells you everything you need to know about the incident that occurred on March 19th. Wasn't Carly.
Not wanting your kid to go to jail for the rest of her life is not.
Those friends still let their daughter call Carly. Why would they be here testifying for her? And let's talk about this genius kid.
Perfectly said, Debbie. Perfectly said.
The story she could have told would have been, I shot my mom and stepdad because my stepdad had been molesting me for years. My mom knew about it and said nothing. And people would have bought it all day long. That's a convenient lie. And it would have served her all day long at the expense of her mom and her stepdad. That's the easier story to tell. But that's not what Carly said. Carly told the hard truth about her mental health issues. A truth that these are rare and it's happening, but that this happens often when you put kids on the wrong medication, when they already have these underlying significant mental health disorders and they get treated with the wrong medication. This is what can happen. I hope none of us are ever judged by the worst moments of our life, but rather by our lives as a whole. And I think when you step back and you look at the facts of this case as a whole. Okay.
So murdering somebody is 10 minutes of time.
And the picture of who,
but we shouldn't judge her for that.
As a person on a whole, you will see that this was not a bad kid. This was not a kid who was enraged. This was not a kid who had hatred in her heart for her mother or her stepfather. In fact, the exact opposite. This was a kid who is experiencing significant mental health issues, the same mental health issues that ran in her family and that we know are hereditary. This is the kid who was compliant with the medication she was put on, However, that medication, without anyone being able to tell beforehand, caused her symptoms to worsen. And while she was having a state of psychosis in an episode of acute stress on March 19th, she lost herself in what was the perfect storm.
Notice she said acute stress and
I'm
not acute
asking you,
psychosis.
for those reasons, to please find Carly Gregg not guilty by reason of insanity and finally quell this storm for Carly and her family.
Hey, Gabby. Flash fan is the best.
No one will understand this case and no one has heard this case the way that you have.
No, we've actually heard
Passing
more.
judgment on another person is a heavy burden to bear, and I'm sorry that it falls on you. But please consider what is at stake in this case for this child and this family before you rush to judgment and render your verdict. Look at those documents, consider the testimony, search your heart for what you know about this child from the picture painted by her of all the people that knew her best.
And guess what? None of her
You tell
family
me,
except for her
what was
stepdad
the
testified.
intent? You tell me why someone who intended and had planned to murder someone wouldn't have taken the camera she knew was in the kitchen and was easy to see down before she did anything, especially when she was a genius. I mean, that's not
And there's
the
no
actions
evidence
of
she was a genius either.
diabolical evil genius, leaving camera footage up for everyone to see, crawling through a sewer instead of just running away, calling friends for help, friends who could later testify about what happened.
I think Carly is very intelligent, and I think she did those things
Again,
to try to claim
I ask you
insanity.
to search your hearts and remember the undisputed truths in this case. Thank you.
Yeah. So, did everybody notice that none of her family testified except for her stepdad?
Mr.
Didn't
Camp, 17
didn't anybody
minutes.
find that weird?
We'll
If she
start
was
the
such a
clock.
good kid, why didn't they
Get everything
testify?
set up and you're ready then.
Bye, Gabby. I don't like that attorney either. And I have to go do mom stuff. My dining room is starting to smell, if y'all know what I
Police
mean.
Court.
We'll see what Kevin Camp has to say.
Okay, we've been doing this since Monday, so I know y'all are probably as tired as I am. This was always going to be a very difficult case, and it's going to be difficult because the issues that we're dealing with is difficult uh, because we're in we're in part of a realm of the law and everything where you've been hearing a case all week, and the defendant has basically said she's guilty. And so there's not an issue of guilt in this case. As we said from the get-go, this is not a who did it case. This is why it happened. Okay, what's going on? That's what you have to make the determinations is what's going on in Carly's mind as all this stuff is happening. And that's the difficult part because you don't get to just look at the video and say, she did it, because most cases, that's what you're doing. And it's an easy decision because you're looking at it and you simply see who did what, how they did it, and that's it. Now, in this case, because we're dealing with her mental state, we're having to get inside her mind and understand what's going on and how that's all working. And that's what this case has always been about from the get-go. It's never been about who did it. one of the things that I wanted to talk with you just a little bit about is you had, in this case, you had three psychiatrists, or excuse me, one psychologist, two psychiatrists. And both of the psychiatrists were forensic psychiatrists. The psychologist was a forensic psychologist. And you had the two psychiatrists gave very different opinions, very different opinions. And some of the things that I wanted to point out on that is you have one of the doctors, which is Dr. Pickett. It was his first time ever being qualified as an expert, first time testifying. He just got certified a year ago. And then you have an opinion of somebody who has even a higher degree, and that's Dr. Clark. And Dr. Clark is board certified in pediatric and adolescent psychiatry, which means he deals with kids. He deals with teenagers. He knows the nuances of how that works. If you listen to Dr. Pickett, and Dr. Pickett was 100% correct on this, he can do evaluations on everybody. But the problem is he doesn't know the nuances of the kids and the adolescents. And we're dealing with an adolescent. Carly was 14 when this happened. She turned 15 in jail. As all of y'all know, things are changing in people's bodies at those ages. They're growing, they're becoming adults. You have a lot of different things going on. All those things have to be taken into consideration when you're coming up with the decisions, or when you're coming up with how to do an evaluation on a person. And that's why you need that specialized knowledge, is to know what's going on in teenagers. Dr. Clark gave you a very precise reason of how all this happened, why it happened. And he said it was a difficult case to look at. Dr. Pickett, he basically wanted to just pick Dr. Clark's case or diagnosis part and say, couldn't happen. One of the big issues with that was the diagnosis of Carly's father. And why that's important is one of the prongs, and I know you've heard psychiatric stuff all week and it sort of gets old, but one of the prongs in order to see if somebody, I guess, is bipolar, one of the big issues is, has that person, or does that person have a family history? And that's why that became a big issue. And you heard Dr. Pickett get up there, and he looked at Dr. Hardy's stuff, said, well, I'm going to change the diagnosis. So he said, I'm going to discount that, which takes one of the prongs away with one of the things you're looking at with Carly. The other stuff that he wanted to discount, and I thought this was interesting, is you just heard, you're reminded about SJ or SK when she got up on the stand. And she said, yeah, Carly had been hearing voices. I knew about it. Carly said that. Dr. Pickett, you heard him on the stand. It's like, if you bring me credible evidence, you bring me something, I'll change my mind. Well, you had the friend say, oh yeah, I mean, we talked about it. Comes out on cross-examination, not direct, which was interesting. But it comes out, and then Dr. Pickett sits there and says, well, it's a friend, so I'm not going to count that. Okay, there's a journal. Okay. In the journal, Carly makes some notes about that she's heard voices and stuff. I'm going to discount that because I think that's her embellishing. All this stuff is, all the SJ's testimony, the journal, all that stuff. This situation. And it's important because what you're seeing is what Dr. Clark said. There's probably an undiagnosed, or there was an undiagnosed situation going on. It happens for a lot of different reasons. You have an individual, Carly, who's not telling everything. We know that. We know a lot more now than we did before. You heard from Miss Kirk, and I thought Miss Kirk was one of the things that was very enlightening with what Miss Kirk said. She was having a difficult time getting anything out of Carly. She really wasn't opening up. And so finally, the last session, which happens to be right before this happens, she was able to open up a little bit with her and get some more information. And in Carly's journal, there's an entry in there that talks about she likes Miss Kirk and that she may bring her the journal and let her see some of the stuff. That was something that was interesting. The other part that Miss Kirk said, she had no idea. Nobody had any ideas that this was going to happen, that there was a chance that this could happen. There were no clues. There was nothing. This is one thing I do agree 100% with Dr. Pickett on. And he said this was an unusual case. And the reason why it's such an unusual case, daughters don't go and shoot their mothers for no reason. Dr. Clark talked to you a little bit about it. It's like, well, usually you either have panic, and we saw it from the video and everything. There's no panic. He also talked to you about that there was mental issues that were going on. They had started in January. She was getting treatment. Didn't know how bad they were, but she had started getting treatment. They were getting worse, as we can tell from different things now, where we're looking in the journals and things of that nature. The other thing that's very interesting is that on the back end, once she was incarcerated and she was getting treatment, the correct treatment, she got better. And that's when she got the Celexa and the Abilify. And those medications were working. And it's sort of what you were just told a second ago. You have to have a stabilizer.
Celexa and Lexapro are the same
What she
thing.
needed was the stabilizer. It stopped the voices. It stopped what was going on. We go back to the 19th of March, and you see what occurred. There's no reason why Carly should have gone and shot her mother. There's no reason. What's equally weird about this whole situation, and it was in the state's opening, they talked a little bit about it. She crossed her arms. Again, very bizarre activity. She's singing to the dogs. And the most bizarre thing that occurs is this. She wants to go after Heath. Why? There is no reason. She calls her friends over. Friends are fine. If she's some sort of psychopath wanting to go shoot 500 people kind of person, if she's calling people over, those would be some of the people that she would, I guess, target. But no, what happens is she's reaching out for help. She's in a mental health crisis. You heard the video that, or the audio, I guess, of Heath when Heath was when he arrived home, opens the door, and gets shot at. He took the stand. He tells you to this day, that wasn't Carly. The person that was shooting at him was not Carly. It's real important. He's the last person that's seeing her right there as it's happening. This is the person who knows. This is the person that sees her every day, that knows Carly. And yet he's saying she's shooting at him. If there's anybody that has a reason to, disavow Carly and say, hey, look, she shot me. I don't want to have anything to do. She killed my wife. He's sitting there saying, and he was doing it to his own detriment. And he's saying, that's not her. Something's wrong. That was not her. And that's what he was trying to convey to you. Now, the next thing we have, can I play the video real quick? Will you help me with that? We have the video from Hinds County Sheriff Officer or Deputy Shack. And we played it. And if you remember, the last thing that he says before, I guess it would help if you have the last thing, and we put it to move it up a little bit.
This guy is so unorganized all the time.
Before he mutes his body cam, listen to what it is.
They're still going back to the freaking body cam
He says
muted.
something to the effect that she doesn't know about her mother. And before we go back and listen, remember what Shaq said, why he was muting it. He said it was a personnel issue. If she doesn't know about her mother, that she is shot, and all this stuff that's gone on, she doesn't know what's going on. That's why that's important. And I want you to listen to it. You're going to be able to take this back and see and hear this video again. There's a policy, and I put the policy in evidence just so everybody's clear. They cannot do what Shaq did. They cannot mute it. They don't have, yeah, you can go ahead. We're going to watch it. How much? Okay. Go ahead and stop it. I'm running out of time, so y'all will have to look at it. But this is, when you go back in the jury room, you have some decisions to make. And these are the decisions that you have to address. You can find her guilty. You can find her not guilty. And if you find her not guilty, you have two different options. It says not guilty by reason of insanity. And then you have to see if she has been restored to reason. If she has, then she's finished at this court. The other option, and this is what you have to look at, is you can find her not guilty by reason of insanity and that she has not been restored and that she's a danger to the community. And what that means is she goes to the state hospital or somebody comes, so she gets evaluated and they make the decisions on what happens to her. So when I'm telling you this is not, she has the keys and she's walking home. That's not what happens. We believe from all the testimony, and you can look on it here, you have the father saying it's not her, and then you have Shaq saying she doesn't know what happened. When you see those, that tells you she doesn't know what was going on at that time. We're asking you to find her not guilty by reason of insanity. And then you have to make the decision, was she restored or was she not? If she's not, she gets evaluated by the state hospital. They determine what's going to happen to her. That's what we're asking for. We want you to find her not guilty by reason of insanity.
Well, that was anticlimactic and annoying.
5 minutes. We're going to start the clock until you get everything set up.
I have some of your exhibits, Your Honor.
If you would just return them up here to the exhibit table, please, sir. Yes, sir. Restroom break? All right.
I love that.
All right. Yeah, if y'all don't mind, we'll sort those out. If y'all have a seat for just a second, we'll sort out the exhibits.
No, they're not.
One
If
of the
I'm-
jurors has indicated they need the restroom.
if I have
We'll take a
accurate
brief
information-
restroom break, all right, everyone remain seated while the jury exits. Y'all just knock and let us know when you're ready, okay?
If I have accurate information, which I believe I do because Flashman gave me the information, and well, he's my research guy because he knows way more than I do. Bridgett Todd is a personal injury attorney, and Kevin Camp, the guy who just spoke, is a DUI attorney. And no offense to DUI guy, but I'm pretty sure that if you're an expert in a certain area of law, you should stay in your lane unless you've trained or been second chair to an actual criminal defense attorney in the defense of unaliving someone, because I feel like that is a very specialized area of law that that's been my question from the start. I don't know.
All right, record reflect we're outside the presence.
I have no idea.
Juror need a restroom break. We're in recess till they knock on the door. Not a minute longer. All right.
I have no idea if no criminal defense attorney would take her. The defense is closing. I have issues with it in the sense of it was all over the place. It was not. I like linear. They're talking about mental health and being all over the place with mental health. I believe there's something mentally wrong with both of these attorneys because they can't complete a thought and have a thought move in a linear pattern. And that's the way my brain works. So if y'all are different, I apologize. I'm not trying to like single anybody out, but like the prosecution did a very good job of going point A, point C, or point B equals C, like the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. It's linear and logical. Action A plus action B led to result C. The defense was all over the place, and bringing up child molestation, totally inappropriate when that was not mentioned one time. And I'm not a lawyer, but a lawyer, if MLS wants to come on and rebuke what I have to say and like give me the law version, I would be glad to have that, or MG or anybody. But in my idea, opening is supposed to be your, like, if you're writing a paper, your intro. This is what we're going to talk about in this paper. This is how I'm going to prove to you what my reasoning is. Then you have the case, which is the body of the paper. Then you have closing arguments, which are the summary. You're not supposed to bring up anything new in closing. And that's what the defense attorneys did. They brought up something that was not mentioned the entire time in trial. And also, why, if they're talking about her family being so supportive, why did none of her family testify? Why did none of her family testify on what they had seen, what they had witnessed, that she told them things? None of them seem to want to have anything to do with it. They might be in the courtroom and they might support her because she's blood, not because they agree with what she did. Roy, they couldn't even hire, their defense expert, and I keep mentioning this, but to me it's so important because I don't think the defense was malingering as far as hiring people, but they did not get their defense witness and their doctor. One, they got him from out of state, which to me means that the pool of people in the state of Mississippi didn't give them the answers they wanted. Also, his report was not written until September 3rd. Discovery deadline was July 28th. So they were over a month late. So his report never should have been brought in my opinion, never should have been brought into the trial. It's, yeah. And I agree with Dr. Pickett's testimony from yesterday. He broke that video down to every second into something that the jury could see, not when she was with her therapist, not when she was with the experts, but the video, something that the jury can plainly see. And each act in the video, he explained down to each different moment why what she did and her actions in the video were not psychotic. Which to me would have been like, if I was unsure about it, that would have tipped me. Because each individual thing, and she was screaming when her dad came home, when her stepdad came home. But she was not screaming in the whole time that led up to her stepdad coming home. Which, to me, means it's an act. You don't hide. If you're in a psychotic break, you don't stop to think where the camera is and put the weapon behind you on the chair. You don't, like, there's just certain things that someone in a psychosis does not do. There are certain things, like when she grabbed the weapon from her mom's bedroom, walked into the kitchen. You saw her look into the kitchen. That's an awareness to see. Because if you were in psychosis, you would have head straight to that bedroom without a second thought, because that's where the last time you saw that person, that's where they were. But she took the time to look. Take that extra second to just make sure she's not in here, and then head to the bedroom. It's just too many things that are calculated. We will see. Because I really don't think that the jury is going to fall for any of this crap that the defense is trying to spew. They were just trying to, in my opinion, the defense was just trying to throw anything they could at the wall and see what stuck. And they were also trying to tell the jury, well, she's just a kid. She's just a kid who has problems. Everybody was a teenager. Everybody was a teenager with an attitude. None of us went and unalived our mom, even though sometimes we wish we could have. Or you say it and, you're like, oh, I'm so mad I could kill you. But none of us actually did it. Because we know that actions have consequences. Even at 14, we know the difference between right and wrong. I just can't, get on with the defense is saying. And the fact that they just had so many, procedural errors that I'm like, you just got me. Don't piss off the judge before the trial even starts. If you think there were judge fireworks during this trial, the judge has been on fire since the first time I watched him in action. And let's see,
All right, jury's not ready yet, but for everybody in the audience, once they are, you don't need to be talking, okay? Once the jury comes in, there's no talking.
my first
Feel free to
video.
talk now, just not when the jury comes in. Do you have everything you need set up?
I read through her indictment in August. And I believe there are videos that I have to add to.
I got just a question on I know like we were talking about where we had to burn discs and everything. Is there something already back there, or do they have to undo all this?
They have to undo all that, take it back there. That's all we have. All right, for everybody in the courtroom, I've been informed that the jurors are ready. Please no more talking. Everyone remain seated while the jury enters. Freeman.
July 5th competency hearing was my first video on this case. So I don't exactly know when that video was, but it was the first video I did was
All right,
covering
follow
her
please.
July 5th hearing. So he has not been happy with the defense since July 5th.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Let me pick up right where Mr. Camp left off, ladies and gentlemen. What he was telling you is that if you find the defendant not guilty by reason of insanity and you decide that she's been restored to competency, she'll walk out the door of this courthouse. You heard about voices. Let me tell you whose voice I'm talking about today. Ashley Smylie. Ashley Smylie's voice matters. Because of Carly Gregg's actions, we will never hear Ashley Gregg's voice again. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard the very last noise she made. Carly Gregg, her daughter, took a gun, walked across the house, pulled it out on her mother, fired once, you hear her mother scream. Fired twice, you hear her mother scream. 1, 2, 3, 4, you hear the third shot, ladies and gentlemen. You saw that awful picture. You saw the stippling. You saw what she did. That person has not been restored. That person was never insane to begin with. You know what you didn't hear the defense attorneys talk about? The insanity standard. You know why you don't want to talk about the standard? Because they can't prove it. They can't prove it, ladies and gentlemen. You know what they tried to stand up here and say? The state hasn't told you why. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk during voir dire, what do we talk about? That's not the state's burden. You won't find one place in the jury instructions that it tells you that the state of Mississippi has the burden to show you why Carly Gregg killed her mother, to show you why Carly Gregg attempted to kill Heath Smylie, to show you why Carly Gregg removed that camera that caught her actions and hid it into the refrigerator. That's not our burden. Our burden is to show beyond a reasonable doubt that she did it. And the defense attorneys have admitted that she did it. Let's talk about who needed help. Ms. Todd wanted to talk about Ms. Gregg needed help. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you that the two people that were begging for help was Ashley Smylie and Heath Smylie. We heard the 911 call. He says, "Oh my God, she's killed her mother and she tried to kill me." He says on there, "Please help. Send me help." He tried to say that, oh, now maybe Carly didn't mean to kill me. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know why he's saying that, but I know that she shot him 6 inches from his head. And I know that she told Brooke Wafer, her friend, that I put 3 in my mom and I got 3 more waiting for my stepdad. You think that sounds like an insane person? No. That's a person that knew this gun right here, this .357 Magnum, had 7 rounds. That's a person that knew that she'd put 3 of them in her mama's head. She had 3 more waiting for Heath, and who knows what she was doing with the last one. The why doesn't matter. They want to talk about the doctors. Dr. Pickett this, Dr. Clark that. Y'all heard him. Dr. Pickett said, yes, this is the first time I've had to testify in a criminal trial. but I have evaluated over 100 people for competency and sanity. You heard from Dr. Gugliano when she took the witness stand that she's done hundreds, if not more, evaluations of sanity and competency. Let me tell you what you heard from Dr. Clark. When the defense went to tender him as a forensic psychiatrist, he said, no, that's not what I am. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. Did he render any opinions specific to children? No. Does his diagnosis of Carly Gregg matter? No. When you look at the standard in the state of Mississippi to be able to prove insanity, all right, she has a mental illness, right? I think we can all agree that those records state that from the time she was a small girl until we sit here today, that she has anxiety and depression. Ladies and gentlemen, it is undisputed that anxiety and depression do not cause someone to commit murder. It is undisputed in this courtroom that Kevin Gregg, if you believe his diagnoses, if you believe he was bipolar, schizophrenic, drug addict, all of it, does any of it matter? No, because you know what he didn't do? He didn't kill his parents. Ladies and gentlemen, the diagnosis doesn't matter. You heard, and I made notes of it. When Dr. Clark was testifying, Michael Smith was asking him, did she know right from wrong? That's what we got to know. Did she know right from wrong? He says, well, she knew something about what happened. Okay, well, she knew. Then he goes further and he said there was some level of awareness about what she was doing. Let's talk about that, ladies and gentlemen. She knew where she was. She knew who to call. She knew her mom's passcode. She knew where the loaded weapon was. You have pictures and evidence. There were other guns at the house. She didn't go pick up that unloaded shotgun and take it in there to where Mama was. No. She went in there with that .357 Magnum that she knew was fully loaded. She knew to text her friends. She knew to FaceTime her friends. She called them by the right name. She called them by their nicknames. She said, I fucked up. She said, don't call 911. You know why, ladies and gentlemen? She wasn't done with her plan. We don't have to prove why she wanted to kill Heath Smylie. All we know is she did. All we know is that after she killed her mom at 4:14 in the afternoon, she lied in wait, sent a message to her stepdad saying, hey, honey, when will you be home? She knew not to do it from her phone. She did it from mom's phone. When will you be home? Because I'm waiting for you. Sends him a thumbs up. Then when he comes in the door, what's she do? Points the gun at his head, ladies and gentlemen. She knew exactly what she wanted to do. And then when she wasn't sure if she was successful, she ran. Insane people do not run because they don't know right from wrong. Insane people do not tell people, I need help, because they don't think they've done anything wrong. Insane people do not flee the scene. Again, they do not know right from wrong. Carly Gregg knew everything she was doing that day. What Dr. Clark said from the witness stand is that he wants you to put all your common sense aside. There's a whole stack of medical records. He says, I didn't really pay much attention to the medical records. Not any of those other providers that actually treated Carly that said there was no mention of voices. There was no mention of lapses in time, these disassociations. But you know what I'm going to rely on? Oh, wait, no, I also didn't look at the text messages. I didn't think it was important to know what the defendant was doing at the time of the crime and between when she killed her mom and when she attempted to kill her dad. That wasn't that important. You know what's important? What the defendant said after she's been arrested for violent crimes. That's what he relied on, ladies and gentlemen. He said, well, Carly said that there were voices before. Pretty convenient, right? We talked in voir dire on Monday about why do people lie? Why do people lie? Protection. Dr. Clark said on the stand, Lexapro doesn't cause murder. Lexapro might cause people to be more prone to suicide. Lexapro does not cause people to murder. Dr. Clark said on the stand that disassociation, that's what Carly had, right? That's what he diagnosed her with. But he couldn't say that disassociation causes people to commit murders. In fact, what he said was that people tend to disassociate when they are experiencing trauma. Let's think about that. Common sense tells you if someone's in a disassociated state, they don't know what's going on, it's because they are on the receiving end of the violence. They're sex trafficking victims. They're prisoners of war. They're not children that are mad at their parents because they found out about their secret life. He expects us to believe that we can take the word of the defendant who has never reported, even to Rebecca Kirk, who she said she loved and trusted. She never reported voices to Rebecca Kirk. She never reported these lapses in time. In fact, you didn't hear that from any provider that's ever seen Carly. Let's take another step. Then Carly doesn't stop there, ladies and gentlemen. She tells Dr. Pickett, oh yeah, I was still having one of these moments. So let's talk about she's safe. Heck no, ladies and gentlemen. She's claiming that she's still having those moments while she's in our courtroom. During one of our hearings, she's saying she was in one of these disassociated spells. During her evaluation with Dr. Clark, she reported that she was having one of these disassociated spells. During her evaluation with Dr. Pickett, she was claiming she was having a disassociated spell. But you know what? She remembered every bit of it. I find it interesting that she told Dr. Clark that she has nightmares. She hears gunshots. You don't hear gunshots if you don't remember them. You don't have PTSD from an event that you don't recall. She told Dr. Gugliano that she gets queasy. She gets sick to her stomach when she thinks about what happened that night. I would too. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we've seen the pictures. We know what she did. That's not the face of someone who's insane. We don't have to prove the why. When Dr. Gugliano asked her, Carly, what's bothering you the most right now? She said, I always ask patients that when I'm evaluating them. Carly said, I'm missing school. Think about that. Not, I miss my mom. I'm so sorry that I did this. Oh, I hate what I've done to my family. I'm missing school. I asked Bennett Germany when he took the stand, you and Carly are still great friends, right? He said, best friends. Y'all talk all the time? Yeah, all the time, even now that she's in jail. I said, Bennett, on any of your calls, any call, has Carly expressed remorse for what she has done? He took that stand and he said no. I want to talk about Bennett too. He said, while I was asking him a question at some point, he said, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I zoned out. Ladies and gentlemen, we've all had a moment where we've zoned out. We've all had a moment where we've driven down the road and got there and thought, how did I get here? I don't remember, but I knew I drove here. I tell you, when I have those moments, I'm not insane. I know exactly how I got there because I was the one driving the car. I know right from wrong, and Carly knew right from wrong that day. There is no record, no medical record of Carly hearing voices before this. I want to talk to you about some of the things, some of Carly's actions. Let's talk about some of her willful actions. First of all, I want to show you these two. Let's not forget this. These were recovered from inside Ashley Smylie's brain and neck. Who put them there? Carly Gregg. Carly Gregg's willful actions. Let's talk about that. We talked about she knew where her house was. We talked about she knew that her mom was upset with her. She told Dr. Pickett, yeah, my mom was very upset. The defense wanted you to believe that everything was hunky-dory that day. It wasn't. We've seen the videos. She may not have been yelling, but she sure was upset. We know that Carly knew her mom's password. We know that she intentionally pulled the trigger not once, not twice, but 3 times, shot her in the head. We know that she called her friends over. We know that she told them don't call the police. We know that she wouldn't let them know what was going on. We know that she tells Brooke, right? Let's talk about the tampering with evidence. She tells Brooke when she comes in the house, when the first thing she asks is, are you queasy around dead bodies? Ladies and gentlemen, use your common sense. What does that mean? I know if I'm asking somebody that, it's because there's a dead body. She knew that she had killed her mom. She tells Brooke, I got 3 waiting for my stepdad. She knew that she was going to shoot her stepdad. She also tells Brooke something important. Oh, don't worry. I pulled the cameras down already. I pulled the cameras down. She knew enough to rip that camera off of where it was, hide it in the refrigerator. Was it a perfect plan? No. Nobody ever said her plan was perfect. That's why we're here. But ladies and gentlemen, that's not insanity. That's not insanity. I want to talk about Deputy Shack and his interaction. Mr. Camp said, oh yeah, he's saying she doesn't even know about her mother. We heard from Deputy Shack. He took the stand. He said she never asked about her mother. Ladies and gentlemen, you know the only person she asked about in her interaction with law enforcement? How's Heath? You know why? Because the only thing Carly Gregg didn't know from that day was whether or not she was successful in killing Heath Smylie. That's the only thing she didn't know. Again, the defense wanted to talk about it's the highest burden of proof. We have the highest burden of proof in criminal law. The state of Mississippi has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Carly Gregg intended to kill her mother and did kill her. We have done that. They don't dispute that. We have to prove that Carly Gregg intended to kill Heath Smylie and was unsuccessful. They don't dispute that. We have to prove that Carly Gregg intended to remove evidence and hide it. We've already proved that. They don't dispute that. The only thing that the defense wants you to do is to have sympathy for the defendant, to believe this story that she's made up after she's been arrested. Dr. Clark talked about that on the stand, right? He admitted that there's research out there that shows that there is a large population of people that claim disassociation after they have committed homicide. And we asked him, why? Secondary gain. What's secondary gain? So I don't get in trouble. Pretty convenient. If I don't remember what happened, I was having an out-of-body experience. Maybe they can't get on to me. Ladies and gentlemen, don't fall for that. That does not make sense. I want to talk about some of Carly's journals and some of the text messages. The text messages are in evidence, the ones that she sent to her friends between the time she killed her mom and when she attempted to kill her stepdad. One of them's not, but Thad testified from the witness stand that after he showed up at her parents' house, he and Carly were having a discussion, and Carly said, oh yeah, my mom was holding me down in the chair. She wouldn't let me come out there. And then she texts him later and says, I almost murdered my parents. She was so mad in February that she tells Thad, I almost murdered my parents. And then when I asked Heath about it, when he took the stand, he said, no, Carly wasn't mad. Carly never was angry. He says, Carly never yelled. Ladies and gentlemen, she told us in February what she was going to do. I want you to look at her journals. There's a page back there that says, what do I believe? There's no God. Heaven and hell are false. You writing your own destiny. And these two stand out to me, ladies and gentlemen. She told us what her intent was. You don't need family, and it's okay to be evil. There's another one I want you to look at. Dr. Pickett talked about it. She wrote, water, fire, earth. Water, fire, earth. She circles fire, ladies and gentlemen. And she wrote, these are Carly Gregg's own words. Miss Todd stated when we got started the other day, what's better, watching a video of what happened or hearing somebody talk about it? Well, I submit to you, we have all of the above in this case. We got to, unfortunately, watch a video of what happened. We've seen photos of what happened. We have audio of what happened. We have the defendant's journals and text messages telling us what happened. She says, I choose fire. It is powerful, beautiful, and deadly. These are the traits I desire, so I choose fire. Ladies and gentlemen, that lady right there chose fire. She chose to murder her mother, tried to kill her stepdad, and then tried to cover it up. We ask that when you go back to the jury room, that you'll look at all the evidence, that you'll consider the testimony that you've heard, that you will not be misled or confused by the fact that the defendant tries to put a burden on the state that does not exist. We do not have to prove the why. We will likely never know the why, but we know that Carly Gregg is guilty of murder, attempted murder, and tampering with physical evidence, and we ask you to find the same. Thank you.
All right. I need Mr. Don Bass and Mr. Philip Hunt to stand, please. Apologize, gentlemen. Watch y'all. Y'all are paid a lot of attention, but y'all are the alternates. At this time, I'm going to ask Madam Bailiff to
Whoa,
escort you to
whoa.
the other courtroom if
Oh,
it's
I don't like
open,
that.
or the other jury room if it's open. Please gather your things out of the jury room, though.
I don't like that.
Once the bailiff let
I
me
I
know
don't
that
think he just knew
the
what he just
alternates have
did.
been separated, I'll release you to begin your deliberations. Please do not begin your deliberations until you receive the instructions of the court and all the evidence. Many times jurors find it helpful to pick a foreperson from among their group. Foreperson has no more power than any other person. Highest qualifications, you should be able to write legibly so we can read any verdict, okay? Second thing a foreperson can do is call for a vote. Many times disagreements can be resolved by simply calling for a vote and finding out where everybody stands, all right?
Ooh,
That being
yeah,
said,
I don't think
do
he
we know
realized what he did.
they're separated?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's gonna be that big of a deal, but at the same time, it's like, oh,
Did everybody fill out a lunch menu too?
it's like crap.
They're separated.
You've been so
All right,
good at
ladies and gentlemen,
protecting your
jury,
jury,
you can retire to begin your deliberations.
and then you give out their names. Oh, cringy. Ooh, how long do you think it's gonna be for this jury? I give it 2 hours. The jury instructions were not that long. I know he's tired, but damn. 6 hours would put us at 5. I don't think it's
All
gonna
right, the
take me
record
really that.
reflect we're outside the presence of the jury. I'm going to ask both sides to make sure Mr. Shipley here has a cell phone number where you can be reached, both sets of attorneys. Within 10 minutes of the jury reaching a verdict, I expect y'all back in the courtroom ready to go either way, okay? I want y'all to get together, make sure all the exhibits are present and accounted for, and that any exhibits marked for identification are separated. All right, we'll remain in recess until such time as the jury reaches the verdict.
All right. So we are now on jury watch. I'm gonna keep the screen up, but I have 2. I believe it was a 6.5-inch barrel, but just in case it's not, here is a Taurus 66, and the capacity is 7 rounds. Here is the 6 and this is what I think it is based on the look of how she was holding it, but the capacity on this one, the Tracker 627, is also 7 rounds. So most revolvers that I've seen are 6, but they do make a 7-round capacity. All right. So I'm gonna make a new thing for Verdict Watch. However, my mom had a 38 special. I don't know what brand it was when I was younger. That was a 6. I don't own one, so I don't know. The revolvers aren't really my thing. I'm going to make a new stream for Verdict Watch. I will update. I'm not going to stick around. I want to do some family time and figure out, and do some family stuff before I come back for jury watch. I will have it up on both my phone and my computer, so if I'm away from my computer. But yeah, can't disagree with that. Yeah. I mean, my 1911 is not even a revolver, so but I will set up a new stream. We'll plan on coming back around 1:30 Eastern time. If it starts early, I will um I'll obviously come back early. If I hear anything, I'll put it on my Twitter. and I will see you guys then. Thanks for sticking around with this whole trial. Even though it's been a short trial, it's been a dramatic trial, and like I've wanted to like shake my computer screen sometimes when the defense attorneys are talking. Like, are you guys this stupid in real life, or are you putting on an act for this trial? Because some of the things they said just didn't make any sense to me. As someone who knows, who has some experience in mental health, not only from the treatment side, but from the patient side, who is very familiar with SSRIs and their chemistry and how they interact, their side effects, how they how they affect adults versus children as far as side effects go. And like it's just some of the things they said just didn't make sense. You guys have a great day, and I will see you this afternoon. I'm gonna go have some family time. You guys have a great day. I will set up the stream before I stand up. Bye.